We've learned how the run game works. Now, what about the fake run game? Welcome to the play action episode on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I will very much reward my June, July everydayers. It's June as I'm recording this. My June, July everydayers, because I guarantee you will learn something new in this one, unless you are like literally Wes Phillips. You're going to learn something new in this one. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And don't forget, you can always find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings on any podcast listening app, YouTube, or even Amazon Fire, and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today, we're going to do play action. So what we've been doing this week, if you are just joining in, these are all pre-recorded. I'm out of town for the 4th of July. So, I pre-recorded a whole series on the Vikings Playbook, or my amalgamation of the sources of the Vikings Playbook, the influences on the Vikings Playbook, which will be Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, that whole tree, little LaFleur, but I don't have much Packers stuff. And from the resources that I have, some of which I can share with you if you want, email me, lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. And basically a crash course on not necessarily the memorization. We're learning how to construct a sentence in a new language, but we're not going to memorize a ton of vocab. That's, I guess, the goal here. And today we're going to talk about the play action game, in particular, the movement game. But there's two kinds of play action in a Shanahan McVay playbook: play passes and movement. Movement is what you think of when you think of like a bootleg, and play passes is more staying in the pocket, but there's still a run fake in there. If you're faking like a more north-south run versus faking like outside zone, right? And those are different things that require different pass plays, totally different categories of the playbook. So when you are going to call a play action play, the play call is going to sound something like pass 18 Wheezy or fake 19 Sift. I believe pass is going to mean we're doing play pass, and fake means we're going to go into the movement section of the playbook. So that's where we're at, right? So a lot of these are going to be 18 and 19 because if you listened yesterday, the numerical play labels that a Shanahan McVay offense uses are going to pair up. Evens are to the right, odds are to the left. So 18 and 19 are outside zone to the right and left, respectively. 14-15 are inside zone to the right and left, respectively. So fake 18 is fake outside zone right. And then you'll have fake 18 Sift. So fake 18 Sift still gives that same Sift instruction that we talked about yesterday, if you remember that. I super recommend that you listen to these in order, because like if you just jump in right now, there's going to be like references to previous episodes. So go check those out. They're all still up. You can listen to them all, take your time here, because I know that these are super, super dense. But that I think is going to give you the best experience. I don't know. You do you. I'm not your dad. But the vast majority of what we're going to see is going to be like 18, 19, and then with stuff like Sift. So the Sift instruction tells the backside tackle to block to his inside, to block the B gap, and then the F, Sift, has an F in it, is going to go take that backside end, right? So you're still going to have that dynamic, but now it's just a pass block instead of a run block. But it's not going to really play out that different, because here's how these work. And in all of these pages of the playbook, you're going to see an instruction for the O-line that says go full speed, block aggressively, really, really play as though this is a run play. There shouldn't be anything about your first few steps that's different between a run play and the fake version of that run play. It needs to be the most convincing fake possible. And here's how you get away with it, right? Because of course we're all worried about an ineligible man downfield. You don't want to roll out where you have a man, 3-4 yards downfield and you get a flag for it, right? But the rule says that you can be as far downfield as you want as long as you're contacting somebody. They're not going to throw a flag on you for winning your block so hard you sled somebody 5 yards down the field. So as long as you're on somebody, which is on outside zone, kind of what you want to have anyways, you're going to be fine. And if that person does eventually disengage with you, you only get a flag if you move further downfield. So be aware of those rules, and once they disengage with you, like chill out. But otherwise, fire off the ball. Get forward, right? Use your yard of grace period that you get anyways before you can contact somebody on these pass plays, and then contact that person and try to stay on that block. And by doing so, you also pass protect, because hopefully you're washing them down and they're not getting their way into the backfield. And if they do get into the backfield, you stop. That's that. And hopefully the movement that's going on in the backfield, the misdirection and all that, is going to take care of that defender for you, even in your worst losses. So this is a sort of, it's not can't lose. Like if you could trip and fall over and the guy goes and gets a sack, right? But it's about as can't lose as it gets for offensive line. And that's why you live in this sometimes, because if you have a backup guard and he's struggling big time, give him these assignments where you really, really, really have to do a lot more stuff wrong to lose and actually have that affect the play. So block full speed, very, very important part of this. Now I picked that example 19 sift for a reason. So one of the worst things about bootlegs is the end man on the line of scrimmage on the backside, or I guess on the play side of the pass, right? If you are the backside edge away from the run action and you're playing against a team that's a McVay or a Shanahan or a Kevin O'Connell and they love to bootleg, you're going to sort of stay home a little bit, which can help against the run, right? Because you're not playing the run as aggressively. And that means that, you might not even have to block that guy if they're going to be super passive in their pursuit. But if you are that end man on the line of scrimmage and then the quarterback does roll out, now you've got a free run at him. So the quarterback does get the instruction, hey, feel that guy. He's going to be your problem. And you have to kind of feel his spacing, get a ton of depth on your rollout, right? You don't just want to run straight out toward the sideline. Get a bunch of depth, give yourself room to work with, but then you got to feel that guy and use your judgment for when that play has to be made, for the kind of decision matrix of how open a guy is versus am I going to have time to move on to the next guy, or do I just need to fire this kind of dubious pass? That's a difficult decision, and you basically, quarterbacks kind of just have to make that play on instinct. So very important part of rollouts is that sort of instinctual ability to sift through those aspects that are all tugging on each other. But if you're struggling with that, or if they say have a very fast end man on the line of scrimmage, the Vikings are going to play the Texans this year. They're going to have Danielle Hunter on the backside of these sometimes, right? So you're dealing with Danielle Hunter over there. You're going to have to, God, just saying that made me sad. Anyways, so let's say, 19 sift. And let's say that sift, that edge rusher is going to get CJ Ham now. He's going to get just enough of him to slow him down, and then hopefully that gives you the time that you need to make your play, right? Now, you don't have to do any of this. You can just do like fake 18 or fake 19 and call that a naked boot. There's nothing else happening there. It's a little bit old school, a little maybe dated. You'll hear Eli Manning and Peyton Manning on the Manning cast. If you watch Monday Night Football that way, you'll hear them call, do it naked here. I think that dates them a little bit. You don't see that a lot in the league anymore. Kind of because, the premier edges of that day were, I think, stronger than they were fast, because there wasn't as much passing back in that day. So you had to be a little bit more muscle, and you didn't have to do a lot of running down. Now every other team has a running quarterback that runs a 4.4. Back in the day, in the Manning and Eli days, there was like kind of Michael Vick and nobody else. And then Lamar Jackson didn't even join the league until those guys were out of it. So, Eli retired after 2019. So I guess they did overlap for a couple of years. But anyways, so you had like just a different world, and that required different edge rushers. So they did a lot more nakeds back then. You don't see it a lot today just because there's more speed on the field than there ever has been. But you can do it. So we now have told successfully the F and the H and probably the Y. They all know what to do, although most of the time the Y is going to be in the route concept, which we'll get to. And now you have to kind of choose, are you doing the play pass version or the movement version? The play pass version, to be honest, is going to probably be, you're probably going to learn more about that tomorrow when we go over the drop back passing game, because it's a 7-step drop, right? It's moving the pocket a little bit, but it's not moving the pocket so much that you're compressing the field downfield, so you can still run back. You can still throw a deep pass to the left or the right. You're only moving the pocket a little bit just to like mess with the defense's pass rush gaps. And then you're still kind of posting up behind the line, and it turns into a 7-step drop. So anything that you call out of a 7-step drop can also be called with a play pass if you just want to give the defense a little bit of vertical eye candy, and maybe you hope they robot or whatever. The real like unique part of the playbook is the movement part of the playbook, which we're going to focus on now for the rest of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. It's the best place to find last-minute tickets to anything, whether it's, say, a Twins game or any comedy show, theater near you, whatever you want to find. You can find last-minute deals up to 60% buying off last minute for any of these events. And they're flash deals, which will be like big letters at the top of the app. Can't miss it, and that's going to be where you get the major savings. And if you're worried about it, you can always Gametime is so upfront with you. You have your seat views, a panorama. You can make sure you're happy with the view. All-in pricing, you can toggle that on to make sure that there's no hidden fees, nothing that you're not expecting. They will tell you what your checkout price will be right up front so you can make an informed decision. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks again for hanging out and listening to this very dense episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, but I've been excited about this idea for like a week. So thank you so much for indulging me. If you want something a little more traditional, go to Locked On Minnesota Sports. They've got a 24/7 live stream that will have not only this show, but all of the sister shows for other Minnesota sports teams, as well as Locked On Minnesota Sports itself, roundtables, panels, all that good stuff. Let's go on to the movement section. So if the quarterback is breaking contain of the pocket as part of the play, the true rollout as you probably picture a rollout, like when you see, PA, bootleg, flood, and you think of the Madden play, right? This is what I'm talking about. You'll tag it with Larry or Ralph. Or I don't know if those are still the words, but those are the words that I know, Larry and Ralph. And I love that both of those have an L and an R in them, right? Because you have a run going left and a play action going right, or the other way around. So the first letter is where the quarterback and the receivers are going, the actual play, and the second letter is the fake. So Larry is a boot to the left with play action to the right. That is the basic nomenclature. So you'll just throw Larry or Ralph in and it basically tells the quarterback the different footwork. And it's like, hey, we're going to actually boot here. But you're only going to put that in plays where it's like very obviously going to happen anyways. And the way that you instruct this, again, to keep things as simple as possible and understandable as possible, relayable as possible, this is where I think the true genius of this whole system comes in. Because like we've been talking about all week, this is a lot of stuff. This is a 488-page PDF that is downloaded to an iPad that you just graduated college, you're 20 years old, and you're a little bit hungover because you just celebrated your draft, and you get to memorize 480 pages of something. So instead, we're coming up with a system that's got kind of default rules, and all you have to memorize is the adjustments that can be made, the variants, the sort of like the side calls that happen on this. But if you don't hear anything, there's like a default state of affairs. I really like it when it works that way. So usually the QB's instruction is to get a lot of depth and then to flatten out and then carve down as he comes to throw the ball. That's going to be the footwork you're working with on this rollout. And again, you're like feeling out that line of scrimmage, that end man on the line of scrimmage. You're going to get some debate about this. Some don't like getting too much depth. Some really want it to stay a little shallower. I think it depends a little bit on what level you're coaching at. If this is something that you're like really debating about what you should coach your quarterback to do. If you're a high school quarterbacks coach, you might approach this a little bit differently because you're not necessarily grappling with like Myles Garrett on the other side and having to give yourself 3 extra yards of depth just so you don't die to him every time you try this. It depends on if you have a blocker over there and all that. But ultimately, the QB's instruction will kind of be, go be a baller and make a play. Do what you got to do. Here's your guideline. Here's what we would love to see if you can do it. But do what you have to here and make a play. The routes that happen, unless otherwise specified, are also kind of like anchored into a default here. So it'll be something like the play call will be something like fake 19, force Ralph, right? So we're faking 19, that's outside zone to the left. We're faking to the left, and then we're running Ralph, we're booting to the right. And then you'll put like Y cross or whatever your play call is, like a branch flood or whatever. This is where you'll see all kinds of different stuff depending on what formation that you're in as well. It depends on, of course, the play call itself. And then team to team, these rules will vary. And season to season, maybe even week to week, these rules will vary. You'll have something different. You'll change a route depth or something as you get to week 6 because you go, we've kind of put a lot of these on film. Let's mess with it a little bit so the defense stays on its heels. So basically, your QB is going to be reading most of the time here. They're going to be reading 1, 2, 3. And whether that's long to short or short to long, again, that's like sometimes that's philosophy. Sometimes you'll always have them go short to long because you want the ball out quick, or you'll always go long to short because you want to prioritize, deep balls and deep passing opportunities and explosiveness. Or it'll be, 1 and then your shallow will be a 2 and then the medium route coming through. Because these are all going to be floods, right? With like a high, a mid, and a low. And the mid coming through is going to be the latest one because it's coming from the other side of the field. So that'll actually be the 3. And it's more of a timing-based thing where you're like, well, this develops the fastest, that develops the second fastest. And then you got, a guy coming all the way across the field. And if nothing else is there, maybe he's going to come through and occupy, some green grass. So let's take something like Larry, stay, Y, shallow. And it's, 19 Larry, stay, Y, or it'd be 18 Larry, stay, Y, shallow. So the stay is going to tell the fullback to stay into the protection. Y, shallow tells the Y what to do, but what do the other receivers do? So here's something that I think is pretty universal to these Shanahan McVay offenses that I've seen in just about every iteration over multiple years, which makes me think it's probably the same. The outermost guy on the play side is going to run a high corner. Essentially, they're going to be the deep guy. Some places that might be a go, that might be a fade, but they're going to be the deep guy, and it's going to be the same route every time, unless, again, otherwise specified. If you hear, tagged onto the play, X post, okay, now I think you're supposed to run a post, or, this is where you put like a leak or something like that, which is always a fun one. But either way, play side, receiver, he's going to be your deep route. He's running something up the sideline, call it a corner. And as we'll talk about tomorrow when we talk about the route tree too, all these route depths will be like super standardized. You come in and you say, when we say high corner, we mean you run to 18 yards and then you go. It is not a 17-yard route. It's not a 15-yard route. It's not a 20-yard route. It's an 18-yard route. And that level of precision is like vital because of how precise all the timings and stuff are. And then the backside receiver, he'll be the one running the low cross. So whoever's the outermost guy, usually it's going to be, the Z receiver, we'll call him. But this is the other guy on the other side of the formation. But if there's nobody on that side of the formation, it would be maybe it's the tight end, will run the low cross. So he'll be the guy coming all the way across the field. He'll be kind of the medium route. And then the second guy on the play side, whether that's a slot receiver, whether that's a tight end, whether sometimes that's the fullback coming out, not on our play call because we said stay, is going to run the shallow thing. So that might be feign the block and then go out to the flat. That might just be straight to the flat. That might be a return or something like that as you try to, mess with things. But it'll always be pretty much standardized. It's a whip route, I think, in a lot of offenses. Just run a whip, tight end whip, like there you go. But if you hear Y shallow or something like that, that's going to tell them to do something a little different. So especially if you have that Y go to the backside, he'll run something different. If you have two receivers on the backside of the play, away from the rollout, you'll have the outermost one will actually run like I'll call it an angle route. I've heard like a pylon, far corner, but basically you're running to the opposite side pylon, and the goal there is to split the safeties, and he becomes an alert. Where the quarterback just sees too high, says, screw all that progression stuff, I'm throwing to this thing, he's going to split the safeties, we're going to get a big play. And then the innermost guy, whether that's a slot or a tight end, will then become the low cross, and he'll be the second guy coming in the intermediate route. You got all that? That's just default stuff. So if you are the backside outside receiver and you didn't hear what you're supposed to do, congratulations. You're running the low cross, or you're running the far corner, as it were, whatever the formation tells you to do, which means that you can make some really simple play calls, and theoretically everybody knows what they're supposed to do as long as they have all these rule sets memorized, which, like, it's not that hard. Like, I just told it to you, but if you had it in front of you and you were given, 2 days to memorize it, you'd probably be able to do that. But you can say, fake 19 Larry, and that can be the whole play call, right? And you have a formation in there and whatever motions, but like, you can keep these really, really simple, but still have a lot of dynamicism, because you can do this out of many different formations, and it like morphs into completely different passing plays, which is super, super great when you've got a young quarterback, when you've got a Brock Purdy who's starting his first game and wasn't even supposed to be because, Trey Lance was supposed to be in there maybe, and so is hurt, right? You can just say fake 19 Larry, and everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and you don't need him to like relay a bajillion different words. And he knows now what he's supposed to see and what's going to happen, and we've practiced all this a million times. That, I think, is a really cool like aspect of it, but it also doesn't get into the meat of the playbook and all the different variations that we have. That'll be next. So if you wanted to, you could turn on all the 49ers tape and you could look at all of their movement, right? All of their play action rollouts, and you could watch that play side receiver and you could start charting out what he does. Just that. Just what route does he run? Don't care about if he caught it or yards gained or down its distance or any of that, right? Just what does that play side receiver do? And what you will probably find is that they're running the same route all the time, over and over again. And every time he runs that high corner, maybe sometimes it's a fade or sometimes it's a go, as as play callers mix things up so that it doesn't get too predictable. But you'll notice every time he runs that high corner in that situation, it'll always be at, this route depth. And you can then kind of determine, okay, that's probably what the route depth is in the playbook. And if you do that work, you're doing what like an advanced scout on the Seattle Seahawks might do as they're trying to prepare defensively to play the 49ers. That's the kind of preparation, those intricate details that can really, really help like a safety to know, hey, if you see a rollout, this thing's breaking at 18 yards, and you can know that it's breaking at 18 yards. So go try to make a play on that. And I don't need to say this like in a just so sense. That is exactly the kind of preparation that got Cam Bynum the game-sealing interception against the Jets in 2022. He actually posted his notes, and that's what the kind of thing he was looking for. That, if they would run double post if they thought it was quarters, and that, here's the depth, and that this is an interception opportunity because of the way that we align. You should be able to break on that ball, and that's exactly what happened. I might even go out on a limb and guess that the Cam Bynum 2 interception game against the 49ers last year was a result of similar preparation and some opportunism, as Brock Purdy made like a bad throw under pressure. Anyways, QB reads here, right? We've got our 1, our 2, and our 3, and that'll be determined as part of the play call. And it'll be something like every time you run Larry Y shallow, that it goes, 1, 2, 3. And that's just baked into the words Larry and Ralph with the Y shallow every time that's there. So that there's a memorization game there for quarterbacks. And then if it's developmental, like if it's not going long to short or short to long, if it's one of those where it's like developmental, or if it's one of those where you have an extra route or something that's maybe a little bit different or outside of the like predetermined structure, then it'll be an alert. And so what are we actually alerting? And of course that depends on the route, but like that far pylon thing, you're trying to split safeties. So if you see it, and generally you can just kind of say an alert is if you see it, throw it. But another really common alert in these is the running back that's just faked getting the ball is going to run a wheel, and he'll kind of leak out the backside and run a wheel. That's an alert. You're like never going to throw that. Like that's kind of just an accepted thing that you're not even going to be looking over there, and that's just never going to get thrown. But theoretically, it's there. You have an option to do it. And I think the greats have that in their periphery, right? You'll see Matt Stafford do that. And in fact, there is a very famous one in one of the most famous McVay games of all time, which happened against the Vikings in 2018 on Thursday Night Football. You might remember that one as kind of the first cracks in the Zimmer defense, as he actually went back to the drawing board and completely redesigned it after this game. But this was the one that made that 2018 Rams team that went to the Super Bowl and kind of put them on the map because it was primetime and everything. And they actually did throw. Jared Goff actually did throw this. It was leak. It was the wheel, and it was basically the same, spatially the exact same thing. You had a flood going this way and then somebody else leaking over here, and it's an alert. So basically nowadays, I think they just have the running back always down there. And hey, if you leave him alone, huck it up. Why not, right? So that's an alert. But it is also just super understood that like nobody's ever looking at that. And it's like if he is open and it doesn't get thrown, let's not get too mad maybe. But that's like one alert. And you'll have like alerts like that. So routes wise, if you're the receiver or you're the tight end, you've got your kind of base instruction. Okay, I know I'm supposed to run a high corner if I don't hear anything else, right? But what about that running back? So in the route tree, and we'll talk about the route tree again in great detail tomorrow, but in the route tree, you'll have stuff that says check on it. It'll be like check wide or check flat or check option. And that check means check the protection and make sure you're not needed in it, and then go run your route. So check wheel would be maybe what we're looking at here. This is much more common to see this instruction on regular drop back passes where the running back might have to be part of the protection, but might not, where you want a 6-man protection, but also a check down. And you can kind of have both by telling the running back, well, look at the protection. And then if you're not needed there, you might as well go out for a route and we can kind of have our cake and eat it too. But either way, we can now kind of take this through from like the O-line and the running back perspective, right? Where you're going to hear 21 week. You know what? We can do a whole play call. Let's do a whole play call from here, right? I'll say 21 strong right dubs. Now, if you listened on Monday, you know exactly what I mean by all of that, but 21, that's your personnel. Strong, that tells the tight end where, or that tells the, fullback where to go. He's supposed to be on the strong side. Right tells the tight end where to go. So right is going to be the strong side because the tight end's over there, and then the fullback's going to be over there. So I've stacked the tight end and the fullback together with each other in like an offset eye. That's my formation. I'm going to say Y bounce. I'm just going to do a little bounce motion just to mess with them a little bit, but it's going to keep the Y on the same side as the tight end. And then I'm going to say fake 18 force. So if you're really astute, you're seeing what I'm trying to do here, which is I'm trying to make this look like Zorro, which I talked about in yesterday's show. Zorro is a run play that will typically use that motion and will have the fullback and the tight end double teaming the edge rusher on the strong side. So I'm trying to use that motion and then basically tell the defense, scream at the defense, look, tight end and fullback, they're on the same side. Your edge is going to get doubled. What are you going to do about it? And then I'll say fake force, which will have the fullback go lead block. And then Larry Y shallow. So I'm going to bootleg to the left. That's my Larry. Y shallow is going to be there. So the tight end is just going to escape all that nonsense and go be my outlet. And then everything else is going to kind of play out from there. I'm going to have a nice little bootleg flood that was supposed to look like a run play that I've maybe run a lot before. So the whole play call will be, and if all of these words make sense to you, because you listen to the last 3 podcasts, that's my goal. And tell me just how good that feels, because I think there's a sense of accomplishment to understanding what it means. If you got a mic'd up in the huddle and you heard JJ McCarthy say 21 strong right, dubs, Y bounce, fake 18 force, Larry Y shallow, and you're like, oh my God, I know what play that is. And that's actually a pretty interesting play call because this is that. Like if you actually can get that, like that's my goal here. And we've got one section of the playbook we haven't really gone over yet, and that is the drop back pass game, and that will be tomorrow. I will see you all for that, and as always, Skull.